All right, welcome to another episode of Tennis Channel Inside In on the Tennis Channel Podcast Network. Mitch Michals from the Santa Monica studios, joined again now, second time on the show. Probably the fastest rising announcer. Definitely got some popularity on the internet going with some of the calls. Did this show about 6 months ago, a self-proclaimed biggest tennis troll there is, Andrea Petkovic. Now you're officially retired too, but welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much. Yes, I am. I had my last match in Bad Hamburg on grass, very randomly, because grass was not my favorite surface. But it was the closest to home. I just live half an hour away, so a lot of family and friends could come. And that was great. But fastest announcer, I don't know.
Well,
fastest rising announcer. That's your assessment.
So we do this podcast, audio and video, and there's a reason for that. Now we got the logos here too, and I want to just peek behind the curtain. The shows comes out every Thursday. We're recording on a Friday, which was the same day we recorded last time. It was your first real commentary week. You call the match in Acapulco. Immediately after that, do you remember it was Paul and Fritz?
Oh, I will never forget that match, the Greek tragedy.
Yeah, well, we got a clip I wanted to play here.
Okay. This match is turning out to be a little bit of a Greek tragedy, Mark. Just as we know in Greek tragedies, everyone dies in the end. So hopefully...
a morbid forecast.
So hopefully this is something entirely different here.
Well, I just wanted to get that into the show because that was when I think you became everyone's darling on commentary. That match was nuts, and it was a kind of a heck of a start for you into the broadcast world to call that.
Yes, it was. Well, first of all, they kind of did die in the end because both of them were cramping. Fritz was vomiting in the end, so there was a whole lot going on. And, I was a bit nervous because when I came in, I had worked for Eurosport before, and the way they do it, they put announcers to certain matches, so you don't work in shifts like you do here. So they try to put, which I honestly don't like so much, they try to put women's announcers on women's matches and men announcers on men's matches. And in a tennis channel, we work in shifts. So you get the night session or you get the day session. Yeah. So you just call any match.
Nobody's perfect. I think the best thing that Tennis Channel does, I know I'm biased, is giving that flexibility. Women 100%. Call men call women's matches. I get the argument of wanting to maybe pay off a long match, but it's the most fair way to do it. Everyone gets, that couple-hour window, so they're calling the same amount of tennis. And you don't know. That's the beauty of the sport, right? You don't know how long these matches are going to be.
Exactly. Well, and I think it's just from a work perspective, if I get the first, or they want me to do the marquee women's matches, for example, and they, for some reason, happen to be the 11 a.m. match and the second match after 7 p.m., I will be there 15 hours waiting for 2 matches to call. So I think this makes much more sense. And as you said, I'm much more for everyone calling all the matches. I think tennis fans are tennis fans. I have never met a person who has said, I only watch men's tennis. Or on the other hand, I only watch women's tennis. I feel like people have their faves on either side. They love a Naomi Osaka or they love a Taylor Fritz. And it's just all over the fans. I think tennis fans are tennis fans, and that's why it's so fun that I get to call both. But before that match, I was just under the impression, I will just call women's matches. I know them all. I just pick up my notebook and I have them there. And then it was Paul Fritz. And I was like, oh my God, I don't have any notes on them.
They literally, like you mentioned it, I think it was when one of them was throwing up, like, I was kind of speaking metaphorically, but now this might actually be a Greek tragedy. And not to get too into the weeds or get anyone in trouble, but the topic that's been brought up a lot is scheduling matches and the night session of these majors, whether it's fair with men and women spread out, and also how late some of these go. Do you have an opinion on that as someone that was a player and, had to deal with super late matches or maybe matches getting postponed or moved?
Well, that is a very good question because I loved playing night sessions just because I'm not a morning person. So I would love to have a little workout in the morning, rest during the day, and then go out and play at the night. And then when you win, you really don't care because you're like, I don't care. I won. I'm in the 4th round of the US Open. The thing is, it kind of piles up on you. If I had it a few times, actually the first time I made the quarters at the Australian Open, I had only played night sessions. So I was like, jet lagged almost, because I had this really strange draw where I played Venus in the second round, and then I played Maria Sharapova, and I had all these really marquee players, so I played night sessions all the time. And then my quarters was against Na Ali at 11 a.m. the first match, and it was really strange for me. And it kind of the no sleeping, or the sleeping very late, sleeping far into the day and practicing very late had really rescheduled my whole biorhythm. So I think it piles up. That's from the personal perspective. I think in general, especially if you've ever been at a night session at the U.S. Open, there is really nothing like it. There's just the atmosphere.
It's interesting with like France and Wimbledon, French Open and Wimbledon, is that they have curfew, cut off the lights, and then Wimbledon. So it's almost like you have to, there's no perfect scenario. You either have to start early or cut out a day session match, but you never know if someone's going to go 5 sets on the men or a long 3+ hour women's match. It's not an easy job, I'll put it that way.
It's really not an easy job, and I work as a tournament ambassador for Hamburg, and I'm sitting in on the scheduling. And this is really hard because we're a combined event. So we have the ATP sitting on, we have the WTA there, we have all the TV executives there, either on calls or with us in the room, the tournament director, and then you have the German press in there who's like, we want the local Hamburg girl on center court. And everyone's like, well, we have also Kasper Ruud and Andrei Rublev.
Yeah, they don't want to be on court
Exactly. Not sure if that's it. So I've been in these programming sessions where by the end, sometimes, especially when it has rained or when something went off, one match went really long, or it rained, or something had to be postponed, the nervous breakdowns I have witnessed in these offices. So just from the other side, I can tell that it's not easy and people put a lot of thought in it. The one thing I don't particularly understand is the late start on center court in Wimbledon. And I understand they want to have their lunch and then they want to stroll in. It's very celebrity driven. I understand all that, but they have run into problems so many times. I think it's time to just put it you don't have to put it at 10 a.m. Nobody asked you to play matches at 10 a.m. Just do it, make 12, and you would have much fewer problems than they have now.
That hard curfew is tough. I know we got on a little bit of a tangent, but I did have a bunch I wanted to talk to you about since that time we were last here, and I want to talk about your official retirement in Bad Hamburg. Andrea Petkovic and Friends was the name of the event, which is just perfect.
Yes.
It's the perfect vibe, perfect tone. What was it like to have that goodbye moment on home soil?
So I was really excited, but in a positive way, because I thought my real retirement has been 6 months ago. I worked through my feelings. I'm not emotional anymore. I just hope Angie Kerber can make it, one of my closest friends on tour, and she had just the baby, so I wasn't sure if she could make it. And then I got the news that she will come out for doubles. So I was so excited. And I never thought about being emotional or whatever, but then I walked out on court and it was 3,800 people. It was fully sold out. Everyone that was there, it was bloody hot too. It was like 100 billion degrees. And everyone was there, so that was really, really fun. And I did get emotional in the end. That was sad, but also very happy that so many people came.
Well, it's awesome you had that moment, much deserved. And I do think that tennis and exhibitions, take a lot of flack, sometimes deservedly so. But there's no other sport like this where you can have a moment. Like, we just want to say goodbye to our favorite athletes in action with a racket in their hands. I think that's one of the beauties of having these opportunities, to have like Jarkko Nieminen had in Finland back in the day, and now yourself. Like, it's good to have these goodbyes in the exhibition setting.
It really is. So it's tennis is a global sport, which is great for tennis, because I think no matter what, you will always have a star somewhere. Like, even we had it in Germany, where for a while after Boris Becker and Steffi Graf, we didn't really have big stars. Tommy Haas was always injured. Nikola Kiefer had retired, and we were stuck without any stars. But that doesn't hurt tennis, because they have Serena Williams in America, and they have Peng Shuai in China. So it doesn't really matter. So that's the great aspect. for the players, the negative, it's not even a negative aspect, but the challenging aspect is that you can't retire at home like a soccer player, right? For example, I know soccer the best because that's the biggest sport in Germany. But when a soccer player retires for the team, there is a huge celebration. They do it on home turf. Everyone is there. It's beautiful. You don't get that as a tennis player that much. So I was very lucky that there is a tournament close to me and that they wanted to give me that farewell, that they made it into a thing. And interesting, you mentioned exhibitions because I was invited to the Wimbledon Invitational doubles, and I agree with you. It's a tricky and slippery slope. How do you play? Do you go full? Do you take out? So that was an experience.
I'm sure there's stories behind closed doors off air about players maybe going a little too hard in these exhibitions.
Oh, 100%.
You're like, hey,
100%. I can't. In 10 years, I will come back when nobody knows me in tennis anymore. I will come back and I will dish really.
Might have to be 20 because your commentary career is taken off. I want to ask you how Angie's doing though. It was good to see her out there, like you said, so soon after having a kid.
Yeah,
looks great. Like how is she doing?
She looks great. She is very happy. She's still planning on coming back. And I have to say, the thing that always annoyed me the most with her, no matter how much break she had, no matter how big the difference of surface was, how big the difference of conditions were, Angie, within 3 minutes of hitting the ball, already felt it amazingly. And I was the type of player who 5 days needed to practice 3 times a day in all different weathers and all different times of the day to get a feeling for it. And she just quickly picked it up. So that was amazing. And that was the same. The only thing I have to say, she has to work on her serve because she hit 27 double faults in a row. And in the end, the people were gasping when she was about to serve. That was very funny. But ground strokes 100% perfect already.
So just a few calibrations. That's it. Just a couple hits and she's back. Well, I like seeing her back. And I guess it's a nice segue to just all the comebacks we've had. Some for the child breaks, but also just time off. I mean, Svitolina lost a heck of a match to Pegula today, but what she's done starting with her has just kind of been incredible. It's almost, in a weird way, she's gotten more mental strength coming back.
Well, the Svitolina story for me really is maybe the story of the year. First of all, physically, my sister had a baby around the same time as Elina. And when Elina played her first match in Charleston, I was there watching her. You could not see that she just had a baby. And I know how my sister was feeling 5 months into it. So that was incredible. But I really felt something that I haven't seen this this representative with her, when a player has a purpose in a way, and you can see that she has a purpose playing for her country, a purpose playing for her daughter. She just came back and she's playing like she's always played. She was a grinder, she was a fighter, she was a counterpuncher, and all of a sudden she's going for her shots. I do have to say, I think I credit some of it to Raymond Sleuter, her new coach. I think he's doing a tremendous job. He already did a really great job with Kiki Bertens before. I think he's a fantastic coach, and you can really see her bringing her game to a new level, and that purpose-driven mentality that she has. It's just she's never negative. She's never shying away from a big occasion, and what she did at Wimbledon was really amazing.
Representing her country, that's a great point. I think, my takeaway from the outside is that when you have a child, it's a huge commitment to come back. You don't have to. You've earned the right to walk away. But if you do come back, there's no half-stepping. You're in. You have to be focused. So when Naomi comes back, Wozniacki, another one, they have to come back driven, or, it's a competitive sport, and also you have other things clawing at you away. I do wonder, though, if this is kind of, and in a good way, obviously, becoming the new normal. So many more working mothers on tour.
Well, I think, first of all, the WTA has put into place a few new rules that supports coming back, which was much harder before. You wouldn't have gotten a protected ranking, so you had to go back to grinding on the Challenger Tour, which is much harder with a kid. So I think that's the systemic part, and then the other part, role models, right? Now that you see that it's possible, we saw Serena do it, we now see Elina Svitolina, although I have to ask myself if she now just increase the pressure on people like Caroline Wozniacki and Naomi Osaka and also Angie Kerber, because I think they were thinking, oh, we'll come back and we'll get like in Germany we say puppy protection phase, you know, where you're like, oh, she's just was pregnant, like let's see what she does, and then we'll reevaluate after a year. But now Svitolina coming back so strongly,
it's amazing.
I think they will feel a little bit of pressure to do the same.
And no, you know, intrigue about maybe I could come back. We're seeing all these veterans come back.
No, I'm very happy here at Tennis Channel.
Okay, I like to
and
hear
all
that.
the other endeavors that I have embarked on. So no, that for me that's not a thing that I'm considering.
More with Andrea Petkovic here on Tennis Channel Inside In. Well, I mean, we're catching you at a great time, the start of the U.S. Open Series. What's caught your eye this week as we record this? We're going into the weekend with D.C., Los Cabos, obviously. There's a clay event in Austria, and we got Canada around the corner. So what stood out as we get on that beginning path to the U.S. Open?
Well, I think two things on the men's side. Dominic Thiem reaching the finals in Kitzbühel. I'm almost more relieved than happy just that he's found. I mean, I think he has found his form. It was just something lacking in his mentality. Just also a bit of fear in hitting the ball fully after the wrist injury.
And you can break this down because you've come back from injuries yourself. How much of that do you think after a certain time, or is it right away where it's always kind of a mental block that you have to get over? Because the shots, especially the last couple months, we saw the shots were there. It did feel like, from the outside again, that the mental hurdle was his biggest challenge.
It did. Well, and he is coached by a coach that I worked with, so I have a little bit on intel, and he, at least for the last 3 months, has been telling me that Dominic was playing incredible in practice and that he's been hitting the ball as hard as ever. But the moment he stepped on the match court, he would be hesitant and would have doubts in his mind. And when you have doubts in your mind, or when you're just thinking about what you're doing, you're immediately blocking yourself. And I do have to say one thing, all the injury, I had really terrible injuries and surgeries, but they were all sort of knee, hip, lower back thing. And the injury that actually ended my career was an elbow thing. And having something on your arm that you hit the ball with is a completely different ball game, because you do feel like, yes, your movement is impaired, but you do feel like if I do my exercises and if I do drills on court, I will get my movement back, right? And you can sort of fake it with exercises, running around cones, running towards balls, stopping and in a safe environment, and then go out on the practice court and then go out on the match court. With hitting the ball, you can't fake that in practice. You have to be confident in your elbow or your wrist, and you have to fully hit the ball. And I realized that having an injury on your hitting arm is something completely different, and I can see how it messed with Domi's head, because it did mess with my head. I was somebody who always loved training, not so much in the gym, but hitting the ball, playing matches. There was always something I really enjoyed. And I lost my love for the game because I knew I was in pain for at least the first half an hour before it got warm and the pain subsided. So I will say that this is very different than an injury on the knee or the ankle or something similar.
No, it's good to hear a pro actually say that, because we suspect that, and you have to have that mental hurdle. Like, am I comfortable emptying the tank? Will I re-injure this? And it's good to see, and the home crowd embracing him. You played in some home tournaments. Did you feel that as an extra lift, or maybe on the other side, did you also feel the pressure of playing at home?
Oh, 100%. I have to say, I played well, and I didn't have terrible results, and I have a positive head-to-head in my Fed Cup matches. I played well in Stuttgart, not great, but I played well there. But I did play better when I was playing against the home crowd, right? Because I just it would take pressure off me, and it would put pressure on the other person. But you can see just how much it means to Dominic to be electrifying this crowd. And on the women's side, I have to say, also because I'm so interested in the psychological aspects of the game, very happy to see Jessie Pegula win her match against Svitolina today, because I know she said that she's taking the positives from her loss in Wimbledon, and I'm glad that she sees it that way. and tennis players need to be optimistic, otherwise they will not make it on tour. But I was worried that loss against Vondrousova, where she had break points to go up 5-1 in the third, and then Vondrousova winning the title, that can sometimes do some damage psychologically to tennis
It's
players.
a tough one for Jessie because I don't know that anything can happen until the U.S. Open, where we're just tabling the conversation until then.
Yeah.
She handles her business in these tournaments. She does well. She makes deep runs. But it's that 0-6 number in quarterfinals.
Yeah.
And it's tough because you're playing the very best in a lot of cases, but it's what she can do to get over that hump. And she seems pretty positive. She's a fighter as well. But it's a tough one. Her, Coco Gauff on the court. You know, there's a lot of players, especially the ones that haven't won major. Maria Sakkari won today. They have to find a way to stay positive and just trust the process that their time will come.
I know, and that's so hard because that's such a trite statement that you hear. Like I would say that to myself. My coaches would say that to myself. I say it to my players now. I'm mentoring a few young girls for the German Tennis Federation. I say that to them all the time because it's true. That's why it is. That's why it is a cliche, because there is some truth to it. And but I was really, because I was worried that she might lose her edge and start losing early, and then you're really in trouble when you stop winning those matches that you have been, because she still has to win those matches that we just take for granted now, right?
Yeah, so she definitely does. The top of the women's game is fascinating because Iga, defending champ, French Open champ, like has been the player. We're still kind of not, and again, no disrespect to Iga, but we're in that point where it's an interesting time. Women's tennis still doesn't for sure have the top player. Like you can look at eras and it's always been defined by one or two players. Iga going to defend a title. Sabalenka, who won a major but has had a couple tough losses. Rybakina's there. Ons Jabeur, who just can't get that major final win. It's an interesting time at the top, and New York is going to answer some of these questions, but I'm sure there'll still be more to be had.
Well, it's so interesting, and I was so excited at the beginning of the year when Sabalenka won the Australian Open, because I know from my personal experience and just from watching tennis for 20 years now almost how important rivalries are, right? And I was worried that if Iga Swiatek just dominates the tour for the next 3-4 years, that she won't get better and she won't improve as a tennis player.
We're having that worry on the men's side now. Like, let's see who can challenge Carlitos.
Exactly. And that is a danger, because if we put ourselves back into the shoes of 2008, 2009, 2010, when Roger Federer broke Pete Sampras's number, if Rafael Nadal hadn't appeared on tour, if Novak Djokovic hadn't appeared, he would have stopped at 17.
100%.
100%.
Yeah.
We would have never seen these numbers, and that's just the most important thing, not only in sports. I believe in politics and art, wherever, to make something really great, to create masterpieces or to become the best at what you do, you need those rivalries. So I was so excited when Sabalenka and Rybakina found their consistency and started winning those big tournaments. And it looked like it during Indian Wells and Miami, but you still have that weird one-off, right? Like Vondrousova winning Wimbledon, even though when you look at the quarters, it was all the top players were in the quarters, but you still have that weird one off. So I wonder when this solidity of the men's tour from the last 10, 15 years will settle into the women's tour as well.
Did you notice, as someone that's on the taller side, but did you notice towards the end of your career, the game at the top kind of got a little taller? Like, didn't it seem that way?
Oh, 100%. I will tell you two things. So the number one thing is that I was one of the tallest players when I came on tour, and I was in the lower average of the top 100 when I retired.
Wow. See, that's, there was a few back then taller than yourself, but now it just seems like the crop of these players are just...
It's crazy. It was Maria Sharapova, maybe Anna Ivanovic by a small, like half an inch, and that was it. Now, if you look at the top 10, I think most of them are taller than me. And the other thing, and I was talking on air with Mark Pecci yesterday a bit about it, we had a lot of time. There was a lot of rain delay, so we had a lot of topics we talked about. But so my tennis, whoever has watched me knows maybe that I had limitations in my tennis game. I was just very meticulous worker, and I was one of the first athletes on tour, and that was my one-up on the other women, right? Because I was strong, I was powerful, I was quick, and I was endurant. I had kind of the four things that you need as a tennis player. Agility-wise, maybe not the best, but I had the other four. And I was top 10 twice in the world. I had a great career. I played the semifinals of the French Open, all well and nice. I don't think I could have had the same career if I came on tour today, because I do think that the top 30, all of them are athletes now.
Yeah, I don't. You shouldn't shortchange yourself too much, because when we have these era talks, things would have changed in your world too. Your
That's
training
true.
would have been a little different. It could have been better, could have been worse, but we'll never know.
Yeah,
so just
that's
accept,
true. That's true. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll never know. That's true. It's the what ifs and what nots. But I just think it would have been harder for me. And you're right. Maybe my technique would have gotten a bit smoother with all the help of technology
Or
and video.
pushed like these, like you're saying, like maybe you get pushed more and you have to put in more work and more training
Yeah,
too.
exactly.
One other thing on just the men's side, I was looking at the rankings, and as we go on this path, it's kind of fascinating for that number 4 spot. You have Alcaraz, Djokovic 1-2, pretty much locked in. Medvedev's in the 3 spot, but it's Tsitsipas, Ruud, Rune, and Rublev are right there. So this summer series, I'm actually looking to see who's going to get their own, section of the draw. And of those names, does anybody stand out to you for good or for not so good?
Well, standing out for good is Holger Rune to me. I do think he has an incredible foundation that he can build on. He's still very young, and he has that grit, and he has that. Carlos is better than me now? No way. That's how it feels.
You have to have
right?
that
You don't
irrational
know
confidence, though.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it just feels like to me, like he's looking at it and he's like, I can't believe that this guy won 2 majors before me. That's how it feels to me, and that's what you need, right? I do feel Tsitsipas needs a change in his, I don't know if it's in his coaching team or if he just has to give a little bit more power to Mark Philippoussis, who's now back in the team, I've heard. So it's just he has stagnated over the last year in his game, and I know that he wants to play well, and he has really one of the best forehands I have ever seen in my entire life. Not only the way he hits it and how he can generate pace and spin and rotation, but also how quickly he runs up to the ball when he does have a short ball is really never been seen before, I think. Maybe Roger can do it the same way. So I really hope that he evolves the other side of his game, maybe incorporates the slice a bit more like Roger used to do, so he gets the time to run around and use his forehand. And I'll tell you what, I watched the Hamburg finals between Zverev and Jere, and I was very impressed with how Zverev was playing again. I think he was
Could be
playing
back in the mix too.
Yeah, I think he was playing even better than he was at the French Open, where he made the semifinals. So he's also very dangerous still, because he still has that hunger, and you can't count him out fully. Let's see. It's an exciting era. It really is. I would put my money, if I had to put my money on anybody, it would be Holger Rune, because I just see the least limits in his game.
Yeah.
But you never know. There are so many aspects to tennis, and that's why it's the best sport in the world.
It is the best. There's a lot to be excited about. Before we wrap this up, you alluded to it, but are we in the coaching circle now? Or are we just working with some German players? You have to help me pronounce her last name, but you were with Noah Akugwe,
yes,
who made that run to the final of the tournament. It was a sensational run. But at the same time, I read some of your quotes where you're like, this process is good that it's slow. It's good that she takes time and makes the steps, the baby steps to get there because she's so young. What are your thoughts on, I guess, her game, her development? What role have you had in working with the young player?
Well, so my role is the mentor of the German Tennis Federation for exactly that type of player, somebody who has just arrived on tour, like Noma. We have a few others. Jule Niemeyer is the oldest of these players that is still in my department, so I still take care. And I'm sort of like, that person at dinner that always eats the rest of everyone else. That's my role, kind of. So when somebody doesn't have a coach or is in between coaches, I swoop in, I help out. Or if, for example, Jule's coach does a lot of TV in Germany, so when he's working TV, I help her out. So that's kind of my role. They sometimes call me to ask for really dumb things like tournament scheduling, or like, hey, should I take this electrolyte? So basically from A to Z, I'm there for everything. And Noma is in between coaches right now. So that's why since Berlin, I've been working a bit closer with her, and she has so much potential. It is insane. And when I know how much she wanted to win that tournament, but when she lost, and I really wanted her to win, but when she lost, I was almost relieved because I could also already smell the German press
expectations.
Going like, yeah, they were like sharks already, like just smelling the blood and just waiting for that little piece of meat that, you know, gets dropped into the ocean. And so I was almost relieved that she has a bit more time to develop a few more features in her game, and also in calm and peace without the pressures of German media going crazy because we have possibly a new German star.
So you're like the handy woman when there's a problem.
Yes, exactly.
Exactly. Yeah. And the electrolyte thing is actually like, you know, we see it a lot, and I don't think anybody outside the actual players fully understands just how much preparation, especially now with how hot it is.
Yeah.
You really have to put the work in on your diet and on your training and rest beforehand. We've seen the unfortunate circumstances of players not doing that, and it hasn't been pretty.
Well, I don't know if you've ever read Pete Sampras's open letter to his younger self.
Yeah.
That was an amazing piece, to me, an amazing piece of literature, not only of tennis history, but there is one passage where he says, that night when you couldn't eat, you should have eaten, or something like this.
It's too late.
then it's too late the next day. And for example, one of the things, and it's so simple and so on the hand, but they are young, they don't know this, that I implemented with Noma. She would sometimes cramp because she was so nervous before matches that she wouldn't eat, or she would just eat like 3 leaves of salad.
That's such a good point. I mean, people don't fully understand that sometimes cramps, a lot of times, they're nerve related.
Yes,
until Alcaraz
exactly.
said that, a lot of people didn't realize that was even a thing.
Very much so, or nerve related before the match, where you have a bit more tension, your muscles are already under tension, and then on top of that, they can't eat. The players can't eat because they are so nervous before the match. And Noma had that, and so just having her eat during the matches, eat before, these simple things can already make a big difference.
They have,
if it's 400 degrees out there. And now with climate change, I mean, let's not get into it. Although yesterday we were kind of Weather Channel with all those rain delays. You know, it's just getting hotter, not less hot. So these are little things that if the players trust you and you can implement those things, they are very important.
Well, you've been very generous with your time, Andrea Petkovic, here on Tennis Channel Inside In. I had a couple quick hitters before we let you call matches with Mark Petchy, a pro's pro who can just handle everything. You know, the topic that came up recently in the news front again was how cold handshakes are. And I did want to bring up a piece of literature that you brought up about the definition of what a really cold handshake is. Gisela Dolko, I grew up a fan,
so you know her very well.
So this story is great. You know, my favorite tennis memory, playing her in Tokyo. She went for an air kiss, I went for a hug, and you guys ended up almost making out in front of 3 fans in Tokyo.
That was the best. It really is. I think people thought I was exaggerating to make a point on Twitter or X or whatever it's called now. I really think this is my favorite tennis memory because every time I think of it, it makes me laugh so much. Just the confused look on the Japanese, like 3 people that were in the audience. We played on an outside court. It had rained. It was similar like a day-to-day where it had rained the day before. So they played 10 matches at the same time at 10 a.m. And my coach just being so confused, like what is happening? So it always makes me laugh, and it will stay my favorite memory of all time.
Just have to be there, I guess. That's the rule. You have to show up at 10 a.m. And, you know, look, I mean, we couldn't find the footage of it, but,
yes,
you know, and seriously, this is like, you guys are all competitors. It's not always going to be, you're not thrilled you lost. So sometimes it might just be a drive-by with nothing personal behind it.
Yeah, well, and I do think that sometimes you can see, if you watch a match closely, like somebody calling a medical timeout and not a pertinent time, and then the handshake being a little cold. I think you do, or you can interpret something into colder handshakes, and then other times it's just
happens.
I have to say, like, the most impressive thing I've seen over the course of the last 5 days is Sebastian Offner fully like
that was
looking the other guy in the eye, shaking his hand, hugging him like, hey, well done, man, after being up 6-3.
How long would that stick with you?
I mean, I think it would never leave me ever. I think I don't know how he's coping. He needs 3 sports psychologists after that loss. But I had so much respect for him for just shaking the other guy's hands. I think it was Alex Molzan, just shaking his hand, tapping his back. I was like, you go, boyfriend, because this is impressive.
Wow, that's some sage advice. I hope he bounces back from a tough loss. And the last thing I have from the video wall, you're a sailor now?
That was very good.
Yeah.
That was my favorite thing.
That's Eva Lise,
That
right?
is
Yeah.
Eva
Shout out
Lise.
to her. Made her first main draw this year. Another one of the players you're kind of looking after.
Exactly.
But
She's
what
also in my
was this
department.
day like? I mean, what were the vibes like? Was there music? Did you have some drinks on there?
No,
Like,
I wish. Unfortunately, it was more like a photo op, and
Okay.
I tried to make. And actually, it was really interesting. So the woman next to me is Sandra Reichel. She's the tournament director of the Hamburg European Open, and then
Okay.
in the back, those because inclusivity is very important for her. So we had wheelchair tennis,
Okay.
and the women who are doing the sailing for us, because obviously we don't know how to sail. One was deaf, one was blind, and so it was really amazing. They were amazing, and I pushed for us to go further, maybe into the North Sea and never come back. Unfortunately, Eva Lise didn't want to come with me because she had to play the next day. But
Okay,
that's the
fair,
cool
yeah.
thing about this tournament. They always
Okay.
try to do it a bit differently.
So a photo op, not a professional sailor, but you know.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Maybe a sailing course on the way.
Well, Andrea Petkovic, just was a blast. Always good catching up, talking tennis. I guess we can go with there. I mean, now that you're officially retired, commentary. I know you're doing writing. You're just taking on more gigs. It seems like you're busier than ever now.
I am busier than ever now, and it's just the curse of saying yes to everything, which is also a blessing. And I'm glad I did that when I retired, because I was able to dabble my toes in different waters and try things out. Sorry. And so now I know what I like, what I don't like so much, and I think it will. It probably won't be calmer in the future because I just like working and I love tennis, and it's hard for me to stay away.
Do you have a piece of advice for players, athletes of any sport going through that transition, how to manage it, how to take on tasks, and how to just get used to, for lack of a better term, civilian life?
So actually two. Number one, I would say you have to go through it, because in the beginning, when I felt the retirement was coming up, I was trying to push away the feelings and just trying to ignore it best I can. And then when I finally started going through it and going through the grief, because it is a grieving process, you're losing a part of your identity. Since I'm 12 years old, when people ask me who I was always saying a tennis player, and now I'm not anymore. So I do think it's a grieving process, and you have to accept it and let it flow through you and be sad and angry and all those emotions. And then once that is over and you are ready to move into a next thing, if you want to stay with the sport, I think sharing your experience, what I try to do, is it's something beautiful to give, because sometimes I feel like, I didn't really contribute to society as a tennis player, and I'm not sure if I'm contributing now, as an analyst, or as a mentor for some girls. But I think if you can share your experience, and that's something that only you have, I think that is a beautiful contribution for the generations to come afterwards. And I really do love tennis. I really think it's the most beautiful sport in the world, and I also strongly believe it should be the second biggest sport in the world, at least. And maybe we can also push off soccer from the throne. But I know in America the sports sections are a little bit different than in Europe. But I strongly believe that in any region, tennis should be higher than it is right now, and that's something that I want to contribute to in any possible way.
Well, you're paying it forward, helping the next generation, staying involved in the game you love. We all appreciate having you here. One of the most popular, as I said at the beginning, commentators here. And we picked, the most suitable quote from the broadcast clip. There were some other inside jokes we didn't have to get to, but we did see those as well.
That's for the next one.
That's for the next one. Andrea Petkovic, thanks so much for coming on Tennis Channel Inside In.
Thank you, Mitch. That was amazing.